And most of us just don't eat with intention. We eat driven by the emotion and we're just on autopilot. We don't disrupt the pattern to stop and think like, oh, what is this? What kind of hunger is this?
What if there are things we never had the opportunity to learn? We've all been to school or training, but there are things they never taught us that actually make a powerful difference in life. I'm here to share with you all the pieces you've been missing: mindset, health, success, and more. And we'll all learn together from guests along the way. We may not have learned it the traditional way, but oh my goodness, let's keep learning how to do things differently. OMG, Teach Me crew. I am excited to be back with you today. And today we are talking about emotions and hunger and eating. And we're coming at it from an angle that I think is going to be really helpful for you. Because of course, we know that eating healthy is really important. And we know that what we choose to eat is really important. And at the same time, sometimes maybe it's hard to figure out, am I actually hungry? Should I actually be eating? When am I supposed to eat? Is this just something else? Should I deal with it another way? So many questions. So my guest today is going to help us out with that. Jennifer Dent Brown is joining us today. She is a diet industry disruptor, and I love that. As a certified health and life coach, host of a wildly popular podcast, and founder of the weight loss process, Stop Dieting Forever. Love that too. She is freeing women all over the world from their dependency on diets to lose weight for the last time. She also has a free weekly newsletter, and so I'll put it in the show notes as well. But welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Cheryl.
I'm so glad to have you. And I do think this is going to be a helpful conversation for everyone.
I think if you're an eater and you're an emotional eater, it will be helpful.
Yes. And I assume we're all eaters, but yeah, the emotion comes into it for sure. So let's start with your story, because I just always think this is powerful. You know, we just go through things that mean that we find our way in the world in a more powerful way. So how did you end up working as a life and weight loss coach?
Yeah, so I had my own struggles with weight. I was fat and I spent lots of years trying to lose weight. So really, I didn't have a weight problem until I went to college. I had the freshman 15, and then it was just like every year gaining more and more and more weight. And so that was in the 90s where low-fat diets were popular. Mm-hmm. And I remember my first diet when I came home for summer vacation. I had a corporate internship, came home for my first year of college, put on like my little corporate suit, and it was way too tight. And I just remember my parents were like, go back upstairs and change your clothes. And at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to lose weight. And so my mom was like, Weight Watchers, because that's what she did.
Right.
And from there, I started this whole cycle of diet after diet after diet. So I was always successful with losing like 7 pounds, 10 pounds, because I was using willpower. And then I would go right back like, oh, I'm feeling good. I'm losing some weight. And I would go right back to my old habits. And then before you know it, I would gain the weight back. But then I'm like, oh, shiny object syndrome. Let me go find a new diet. And because the diet industry is a $1 trillion industry, there are lots of different diets and supplements to choose from. And, you know, I tried weight loss drugs back in the day. And so that was my cycle for about 2 decades. Of just like always being on a diet, looking for a diet, or in the middle of quitting a diet. So one time I ran across a woman's site. I was looking for my next diet, and she was a health coach. And at that point, I had never heard of coaching. I didn't know what the coaching industry was. Certainly never heard of a health coach. But on her website, she said in big letters, if you think you've tried everything, you haven't tried this.
Ooh.
And I was like, girl, I have tried everything, but I'm willing to see what you have. So she had a 6-week group program. And that's where I learned about the mind-body connection, holistic health, like your lifestyle, how it impacts your eating and all of those things. And I was fascinated. So I was like, okay, I need to know more. I was like, where did she learn this information? Turns out she went to the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. I immediately signed up and It was a year program at the time, and I just wanted to do it for myself. Like I wanted to just keep learning more about this different way of like looking at food and how to adjust my lifestyle. And I started losing weight, and people were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a coach. Like I'm being trained as a coach." I was like, "You want to be my client?" And so that's how I started coaching, and that was in 2014. That was
Wow.
10 years ago.
10 years. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. You know what? I ask this question every time because it's always such a personal story that leads us to do these impactful things. And so I was imagining that probably you had gone through something. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in college around the same time. I remember all the fad diets. Of course, they're not gone. And weight loss drugs are really having a big resurgence right now as well. So,
Mm-hmm. Oh, we can
yeah,
talk about that too. Yeah, I got some thoughts
we
about
might need to
that.
bring that in. Let's put a pin in that for the end and
Okay.
see, because I have seen that a little much lately. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on to our topic that we had planned, but we'll come
Mm-hmm.
back. One thing you said to me when we spoke previously was that oftentimes we never have really learned how to deal with our emotions without using food. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Mm-hmm. And it's not that we are consciously saying, okay, I'm not dealing with this emotion. I'm just going to have the donut instead. We're just in this loop, right? It's like, oh, I'm hungry. Let me go get something to eat. We don't question the hunger. We don't question why, like what's happening. We're just like, oh, food. And because there's food everywhere at
Mm-hmm.
all times, it's very easy to get our hands on. We just go eat, and there's no thought about it, and it's just like, oh, and then we have these stories that we tell ourselves like, oh, I'm addicted to sugar. Oh, I just have a sweet tooth. Oh, I just like a little something sweet after dinner. Like we just tell ourselves these stories and we never question why.
Yeah, such a good point. And I guess it's a lot of habit, right? We're just kind of
Totally.
used to it.
Total habits.
Interesting. And maybe that is sort of how we get the idea of comfort food as well. I feel like if I eat like the sweet, carby, warm, gooey stuff, that feels good. And it's a habit and it's some story I'm telling myself, I assume.
Yeah, yeah. And there's different ways to tell, like, if it's emotional hunger that you're experiencing or if it's physical hunger. Most of us don't know the difference. We just feel hungry and we're like, oh, let me go eat. But one of the characteristics of knowing that it's emotional hunger, like you just said, when you crave comfort food, but if you're craving something very, very specific, it usually is emotional hunger. Like there is some emotion that's triggering this need to like, oh, I gotta have pizza. I really want some mashed potatoes. Like it's something very specific. Now, when you're just physically hungry, you're like, oh, I just want to get something to eat. Like it's not. Your brain isn't locked and loaded on something. You're open to being a little bit more flexible of like, let me just get some food. Let me get some energy. Let me just, get a little something and then I can keep going on. It's not like you're obsessing of like, oh, gotta have like macaroni and cheese right now.
Which does sound good. But putting that aside, that's a very good point. And I am a little bit hungry as we're talking. And so I was kind of evaluating as you're saying that, do I care? And no, because I'm hungry, I would just want something to eat. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess that's physical as opposed to emotional, maybe. Interesting.
Could be. Yeah.
Interesting. So, how do we recognize the different types of hunger, kind of going beyond
Mhm.
that? Are those the two, or are there more?
Well, I say there are 5 types of hunger. It's what I teach in my program. I think these are the most common ways that people experience hunger. We have clock hunger, which maybe you're getting hungry because it's almost 6 o'clock. Like we have these beliefs of like, oh, 12 o'clock, it's time for lunch. I don't know what part of history someone in the world decided at 12 o'clock, that's when everybody breaks to have lunch. And so we have now have this habit. We look at the clock. Oh, it's almost lunchtime. I'm hungry. Instead of just being hungry and noticing what time it is. It's usually flipped around. So that's clock hunger. There's mouth hunger, which is really just a craving for something, comfort food. You want to like maybe change the texture. You want something sweet to eat. This usually most commonly occurs for me, and I've seen this in my clients too, like after dinner, or like after you have a salty meal. Oh, I just need a little something sweet.
Yeah, a little, yeah.
Or like cheese is one of those foods that it like has a certain texture that people crave. So like, oh, let me just get a little bit of cheese, and you start like slicing off the end of the cheese block in the refrigerator, just a couple of pieces. That's mouth hunger. Then we have visual hunger. There are lots of advertisements on television. You look at the TV and you're like, oh my God, that pizza looks amazing. And you may not order it in that moment, but it's in your subconscious, especially if it's like you keep seeing it repetitively. It's in your subconscious. And then Friday rolls around and you're like, I think I want some pizza. And then you order the pizza that you've been seeing in the advertising. That was my major in college, was advertising. So I'm all like on to the marketing, the food companies when they're marketing food to us. But that's visual hunger. Or even like, another example is when you go into a restaurant and you like look at the next table and say, what are they eating? Like, oh, that looks good. Or you look at what the waiter is bringing out to a table and you're like, oh, tell me what they're having over there. It's like, you want to know because it looks good. And it's like, it creates a hunger for us for that specific food.
Good point.
And then we have limbic hunger. And limbic hunger is just this thought of like, I may not be able to eat later, so I better eat now. If you've ever been in a situation where you're fearing you may not have access to food later, like if you have meetings back to back and you're like, oh my God, I better eat now because I'm not going to be able to eat until 3:00. So I better eat now, even if you're not hungry. So it's this fear of not having access to food that makes us hungry. Like we need to eat now. So those are the 4 types of emotional hunger. And then there's physical hunger, like true physical hunger. And most people don't know the difference between like what physical hunger feels like in your body and all the other types of hunger. And that's when we get confused. Yeah. So I feel like I always say that emotional hunger is like a wolf dressed in sheep's clothing, or a sheep dressed in wolf's. Wait, did I get it? What's the analogy?
Wolf in sheep's clothing, maybe,
Yes.
is my guess.
That's it. A wolf in sheep's clothing. Yes. And it just feels like, oh, I am so hungry. And we don't question it. We don't ask ourselves, what type of hunger is this? We just go and eat.
Right. So how then in the body does physical hunger feel different than these other kinds?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different for everyone. So I give my clients an activity, and I'll tell your listeners what to do to reconnect with that feeling of the true physical hunger. Just wake up tomorrow and don't eat. Like just say, okay, I'm not going to eat until I feel physically hungry. And you may experience all these other types of hunger. You may, at 10 o'clock, you might be like, ooh, I need my mid-morning snack. Oh, that's clock hunger. Or you may you walk past the break room at your office and you see there's like donuts on the counter. You're like, ooh, visual. Oh, that's visual hunger. So you may experience all these other types of emotional hunger before you feel physically hungry. Usually it's a sensation in your stomach. It's like a hollowness or maybe a rumbling. But one of the easiest ways you can tell is that true physical hunger, it's like gentle. It's like it rolls in like a wave. Like you just like, oh, I'm a little hungry. And then if you keep doing something else, it kind of disappears, or you like have some water, like it disappears.
Yes.
Versus emotional hunger, it's like, oh, I'm not, like it's this urgent need, like, oh, I got to eat right now. So physical hunger just is like, oh, you notice, oh, I think I'm getting hungry. And then it like dissipates a little bit and then it'll roll back in. And then you feel a little bit more hungry. And most of us will feel that sensation in our stomachs, like physically.
You know what's so interesting about that is I had some binge eating issues many years ago. And so there's a lot of emotional stuff for me with eating. And I had to learn how to feel this. Mm-hmm. And the most surprising thing was that it dissipates, like you just said. And I just wonder if people actually realize that, because it's kind of fascinating. You feel really hungry, and then if you don't do anything, it'll go away.
It goes away. Yeah.
Fascinating. And then it comes back, of course.
But I think a lot of us are so like, we need food to be a distraction. Like, I even caught myself doing this today. I was just in the middle. It's Thursday. I have like some things I needed to do that I wanted to get done by the end of the week, and it's still not done. And I'm like, okay, Jennifer, we got to work on this thing. And I'm like, is it lunchtime yet? Like, I'm just looking for a way to like distract myself away from this work because it was uncomfortable at the moment for me to focus on the task at hand. Much more pleasurable to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go now. It's lunchtime. Let me go get something to eat.
So
And I just
true.
noticed my brain going there, and I'm like, okay, Jennifer, like it's not lunchtime. It's time to get this thing done.
You know what? So true. It's a distraction. It gives us a break. It's procrastination. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now, I've also heard, tell me if this is common, and I think you actually might have said it quickly, that sometimes when we're thinking we feel hungry, we might just be thirsty and just need
Oh, yeah.
water.
Lots of times. A lot of times people just don't drink enough water. So one of the things I always like to encourage my clients is like, okay, can we drink 2 liters of water a day?
Mm. 2 liter. I'm picturing the soda 2 liter. Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
have to convert that to how much, but that's not a small amount.
No, and it's funny. I don't necessarily like to give ounce recommendations, but if you're drinking enough water, if you're hydrating adequately throughout the day, you will quell those little hunger grumblings in your stomach much easier. So just stay hydrated.
Yeah, that's good to know. It's funny how we don't do that. Or maybe sometimes we're drinking other things that are not hydrating us. I don't know. But it seems to
Could
be a
be.
common problem.
Yeah, it could be. So if it's a sugary beverage, then that's going to spike your insulin, and then may have a crash, and all of a sudden you're like, you need more sugar to bring yourself back up again, or it just creates more of a hunger sensation.
Right. Okay. So I think this has probably been helpful for people to understand how it feels. You're listening to OMG Teach Me because you want to learn how to live well, how to leave the angst behind, maybe some secrets that you never learned in school that might make a really big difference in your life. Well, I have for you 7 days of secrets to living well for free. So make sure that you come check it out. Sign up at www.bit.ly/OMG Teach Me secrets, and I can't wait to hear which ones you try and which ones make a difference for you. Now, what if we're in a situation where we kind of know that we might be using eating as a distraction, or eating because of the clock, or eating because we're stressed, maybe at work? You mentioned being in the office. What are some things that maybe we can do to make better choices?
So, better choices. Oh, there's so much judgment laced in that comment.
Healthier choices? Should I say it that way?
It's just a choice. So I teach my clients that food is neither good nor bad.
I agree.
It's just neutral. It is what it is. It's just food. We put all the pressure on ourselves when we give food a label of like, oh, and we either make ourselves feel badly or very self-righteous depending on what food choices we make. So that's why I'm like, don't like to use the word good food choice. We're just making a choice. Now, the difference is I want you to make an intentional choice to eat versus an emotional choice to eat.
Okay.
So weight loss is nothing but a series of decisions, and we're making decisions all day, every day. We're deciding what to eat, what not to eat. We're deciding when to start eating, when to stop eating. Like, we're constantly making those eating decisions. And the better you get at making those eating decisions, the more weight you can lose. So if we take away the belief of like, oh, I'm making a good choice, or I have to make a good choice, and we're just making a choice and we're deciding to be okay with whatever the decision is, then that makes things so much easier, and it cuts out all the mind drama when it comes to losing weight.
Such a good point, because we're always just berating ourselves or congratulating ourselves, but then worrying that we're going to fall off the wagon again and just all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
It takes up so much energy and so much space in our heads when we're trying to figure out, okay, I always think about this. This was my experience when I used to go out to eat in restaurants. It was torturous. It was torturous when I was trying to lose weight. And, you go into the restaurant and you're looking at the menu and you have this whole dialogue back and forth in your head of like, I really need to make a good choice. I need to have like a salad or something like that. But the other half of you is like, but that lasagna looks really good. Or that, Alfredo looks really, really good. Or that I'm a burger person. The burger and fries look amazing. But then it's like, but Jennifer, if you eat the burger and fries and you're making a bad choice and you're going to be fat later and you're going to be really mad. But if you have the salad, then you're going to like, okay, then you're going to end up eating dessert because you're going to say, well, I didn't only had salad, but then the salad could have a lot of fat in it. It's like this whole dramatic back and forth in your head. And you're like the last person ordering the food. Everybody else is ordered and the server's like, ma'am, what can we get for you? And you're like, but I can't decide. And that's because we believe that, I got to make a good choice or I got to make a bad choice. Whereas if you just decide before you go into the restaurant, this is what I'm going to choose to eat. I'm going to eat it guilt-free. I'm going to love my decision and understanding if I choose the burger and the fries, sure, my weight may go up and that's okay. I'm okay with that. And if you're not okay with it, then that's what we work on in coaching. You can't be okay with it. Or if you're like, I'm feeling really good, or I have a long afternoon and I don't want to have something that's going to weigh me down and make me sluggish and bloated. So I'm going to choose to have the salad, for example. I'm going to choose to have, a plate of vegetables. And I'm okay with that decision because later I want to feel really good and keep going. I want to have the energy that I need. That's in making an intentional decision.
I'm so glad that this came up because I think this is a piece that often gets missed in these conversations about food and eating. And that is, how does the food make us feel afterwards?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Besides the whole mind game stuff while we're eating it, which, yes, fully, I get that. It affects how we feel. And we might spend the rest of the day sluggish on the couch if we make a certain decision, right? And so we need to know that about our bodies.
Yeah. So one of the things my clients do right in the beginning, they create their own energy eating plan. So this is where we remove the food labels, but you decide what foods are going to fuel you, give you energy, and what foods are fun to eat, but they may not feel so fun 60, 90 minutes later after you finish eating. No food is off limits. Like you can put any food wherever you want in the column, and it's going to be different for everyone, which is why I don't give people, cookie cutter meal plans. Because Cheryl, you may love 3-bean salad. Like that may be your jam, and you just love kidney beans and black beans and whatever else other beans they put in 3-bean salad. And that you could love to eat that for lunch. 3-bean salad for me is going to give me gas and it's going to make me feel bloated. So it's going to be, it's on my no foods list.
Yeah.
But you get to decide what those foods feel. And that's how you plan what you're going to eat based off of how you want to feel 60, 90 minutes later.
It's so important because I wish I had learned this sooner, but I learned that if I was always eating sandwiches for lunch, then I was always falling asleep in the middle of the afternoon. Like, why was I continually doing that to myself? There's plenty of other choices.
And think about how here in America, they sell us sandwiches. It's like, oh, you get a bag of potatoes or a bag of chips on the side or a cookie. Like those are our two choices. And so, of course, half of the American workforce is sleepy and sluggish at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And then they run to Starbucks to go get their afternoon caffeinated, sugary pick-me-up. And then by the time they get home for dinner, they're ravenous.
Yeah, so true. And so I guess the advice is pay attention to this for a little while, right? And understand what sets you in which direction.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to see my clients just like grapple with that old programming of like, but this is a quote unquote bad food. but I really feel fine after I eat it. So I have an example. I have one client, she had pasta carbonara was an energy food for her. And she just tested it out. Like a dietitian or a nutritionist would be like, oh my God, heavy pasta. And that's like white pasta and cream and bacon. Like it's a heavy dish. But because of like her cultural background and that's just what they eat, she ate it for lunch and she was like, I felt fine. She's like, I had no problem. She had an afternoon full of meetings. She was like, no problem whatsoever. And I was like, that is so good for you to know about yourself and your body. Whereas someone else may be like, no, I can't do pasta at lunch. I'll be asleep by 4 o'clock. But it just depends, right?
Right. That's really a powerful thing, I think, for people to think about. It's not about a good food or a bad food. It's about how it's making us feel, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that changes as we get older, as our hormones change. Like we just have to pay attention. But the way that I teach this is like once you learn it, you can do it no matter what phase of life you're in. You can do it when you're on vacation. You can plan when you're traveling for work. You can execute this plan, 10 years from now when your hormones are doing something like you have no idea what's happening. It's the same thought process.
Yeah. So would you say, I know that we need to eat when we have physical hunger, of course.
Mm-hmm.
What about all these emotional types of hunger? Is it okay to eat when we're having those kinds of hunger, or should we try to distract ourselves from it and do something else?
So again, it comes from being intentional about making the decision because you may have those moments where you're like, we call it F-it moments. I'm having an F-it moment. I just don't care. I want you, and we all get those moments. I want you to name it and claim it. What is the emotion you're feeling? Okay, before you go run to the snack cabinet, just say, all right, Jennifer, how are we feeling right now? What is this? What is this that I'm feeling? Is it anger? Is it disappointment, sadness, grief, overwhelm? Name it and claim it. Okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. And you know what? I don't care. I'm going to go have something to eat. Like, don't judge yourself in that moment. You're still making a very intentional decision. I don't care, but I do understand me eating emotionally, me eating because I'm overwhelmed is not going to support my weight loss goal. It is not aligned with my goal. But in this moment, this is what I'm choosing to do. And it is I always feel like even though you're making the decision to eat, I think you probably will end up eating a little bit less than you would if you just go in blindly.
I could see that.
Yeah. So it's just still making that intentional decision. Now, on the flip side, you may identify the emotion, name it and claim it. Okay, I am pissed off. I am so angry right now. And I'm just going to breathe through it. Like, yep, I know the Ben & Jerry's is in the freezer and it's calling my name right now, but I'm just going to do my little relaxation exercises, whatever I need to do. I call them stress busting activities.
Yep.
And calm myself down and just be okay with being angry right now. And it's fine. Like, it's just an emotion. It will pass. I'm okay. We're good.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Yes. Identifying the emotion, deciding, do I want to eat or is there something else I could do? Absolutely. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't get this out of my mind. So we have to make time to circle back to this. There's more we could say on that, but we got a little tiny bit sidetracked with the weight loss drugs at the beginning. Yeah. And I want to come back because I actually had a conversation with someone the other day about this. And I feel like I hadn't heard much about it for a while. And then all of a sudden, over the past few months, everybody's talking about, I'm taking this, I'm taking that, it works. And I heard some person say, well, I'm taking it, it makes me feel so depressed, but I'm getting thinner, so I'm happy. I'm like, oh my goodness, What is going on with all this?
It's it really makes me, I have shed tears when I hear this. I've had conversations with someone who lost 80 pounds with a weight loss drug. Now she is terrified to wean herself off of it because she hasn't healed her relationship with food. She's still an emotional eater. So the drug is going to just deaden it's going to do the physical reaction. It's going to deaden your appetite. You're not going to want to eat. You're going to get some other side effects with gastrointestinal issues, dizziness, like all the things that they ramble off at the end of the conversation or the end of the commercial. But at the end of the day, if you're an emotional eater and you haven't yet recognized or healed that, you're still going to always end up going back to the food.
Yeah.
One other thing that I've also seen with women who have been taking weight loss drugs is that they drink. They're not eating, but they're drinking alcohol. And I'm not sure what the correlation, like, I don't know why they're leaning towards the alcohol, but they're not eating, but they will toss back quite a few cocktails, which I think I was like, oh, it's so fascinating, but it's really just trading one vice for another.
Okay, that's true. Yeah, I see that.
Listen, I get the desperation. Even when it came out, I was like, ooh, I was like, what is this? A weight loss drug? I was like, do I need to try this? Like, I have been on weight loss drugs, prescription drugs before. I understand how desperate you feel. Like, if nothing works, yes, I'm willing to feel depressed and terrible and have GI issues just to lose weight, because they're thinking the weight loss is going to make themselves feel better and it's not going to change anything.
Right. Yeah, we don't want to be sounding like we're shaming people for making this choice, of course, because we all make our choice. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just, I welcome them. And like the woman I had, she was actually a former client, the woman that lost the 80 pounds. And she was just, we just had a very long, open conversation about it. And I'm like, come back to coaching. Like you still need to work on some, like, of these very basic stories and relationships you have with food. Yes. And we just need to dismantle those, and then you'll be okay.
Yes.
Then you'll be okay. So I'm happy to coach anyone around their emotions, emotional management, understanding what emotions feel like, how to manage them, how to deal with stress, even though you're not eating, which is fine, but you still need to know how to manage your emotions. Like, it's a skill that we weren't learned in school, unfortunately.
Oh, and that is why we're here.
That's why we're here, for sure.
I tell you what, and that turned out to be really the base of my eating issues many years ago, was that I ended up in counseling, and she said to me, well, how are you feeling about this? How are you feeling about that? Mm-hmm. I had no idea I was feeling about anything. I couldn't recognize any emotions, and that took some learning. Mm-hmm. So I fully agree. It's powerful.
We were adults, right?
Yes.
Emotions, most of my clients are saying thing. That's what I'm like, we've got to learn, name it and claim it. You have to identify if you're going to go eat, you need to identify the emotion first. Mm-hmm. Like, become emotionally literate. But most of us, when you're like, how are you feeling? It's like, good, bad, oh, I'm angry or sad. And that's about it. That's the extent of our emotional vocabulary.
I agree with you. Absolutely. And so if I kind of sum up what you're saying, it's a lot about intention, right? Mm-hmm. And making a decision and understanding the decision that you make, and you eat or you don't eat, and you recognize why, and you use it to comfort you a little bit, or you do something else and you recognize why. And that makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And most of us just don't eat with intention. We eat driven by the emotion, and we're just on autopilot. We don't disrupt the pattern to stop and think like, oh, what is this? What kind of hunger is this? Mm-hmm. Or how am I feeling right now? We don't think about it, and we just go to the food. And so we're constantly overeating.
Yes. Yes.
And then we're like, I don't know why I can't lose any weight. Well, I just eat too much. Yeah. And so when you talk to someone on a weight loss drug, they're eating less. So that's why they're losing weight. They're eating less, but they're eating less without doing the emotional work that comes first.
Yeah, it is so tied up in emotions. I agree. I think this conversation is going to be really helpful for people. And I definitely understood that there could be emotional eating and physical hunger, but the 4 types of emotional hunger that you described were quite new to me, and I absolutely see it. So thank you for that. That's going to be very powerful for sure. Mm-hmm. So how can people find you and connect with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah. So you can find me. My little corner of the internet is at jenniferdent.com. I actually just brought jenniferdentbrown.com too. Just
either one then. Okay.
It all goes to the same site. Yeah. So that's my website. You can find my podcast is called Stop Dieting Forever. You can search and find me there. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. I have a little bit of a YouTube channel, YouTube presence, and Facebook.
Perfect. And I will put in the show notes the link that you gave me for the free email newsletter.
Oh,
Is
yeah, the
that right? Am I
newsletter.
saying that
Yeah, so I
correctly?
send out a newsletter called Food Freedom. And I just like to put little tips and things in there that you can start to do immediately, like as soon as like this week, and just to start to see a difference and just change your thinking when it comes to food.
Perfect. Perfect. And maybe it's small things that don't feel overwhelming to try.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so now I have to ask you this very important question, which I ask everyone.
Hmm.
So we need to add, and actually, if I am remembering right, when this episode is going to come out, this might be the last addition to this playlist because when we hit the second year of the podcast, I'm going to start something new. But we need to add a song to the Mood Lift playlist, which is on Spotify and Amazon Music. So, what's your favorite song to listen to put you in a good mood or make you feel happy, raise your vibration?
Well, I had to just say this is the song that's been going through my head since Super Bowl Sunday is Usher. Like literally,
Perfect.
there's been an Usher playlist running through my head. And today, the song in my head is Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, I played that this morning with Ludacris. And he did that at the Super Bowl, Little
he
John.
did.
Yeah.
I love that song. And it makes me think of the movie Hitch, which I also love.
With Will Smith. Yep.
Yes. Yes. Perfect. We do not have that song on the list. And
Oh, good.
I think it's great. Maybe we can dance around the room with that, which is a great mood
Hmm.
lifter. So thank you. Excellent.
Dancing is a good stress busting activity for your listeners. So I
Yeah.
love that you have that playlist.
Yeah. And you know what? It's helped me too because I sit at my desk and I work. And then sometimes I forget to get up very often. And I'm sure many of us fall into that trap. And I'm trying to get myself to just put a song or two on and get
Hmm.
up and move every now and then. And it
Yep.
helps my mood. And I'm sure it helps my body, you know?
That's a great habit. Yep. It's a great habit to have.
Yeah. Well, this has been really interesting. I've learned a lot, which means somebody else has definitely learned a lot. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Cheryl.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. OMG, I would be so honored if you would take a moment, leave a rating, leave a review, or take a screenshot and share on your social media. Let's get this message out further into the world. Now it's time to head down to the show notes to see the resources I mentioned. We may not have learned this before, but it sure is powerful now.